to ThinkTech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers, interviews with folks who have special insight into education from preschool all the way through higher education. I'm Jim Shon, your host. We're streaming live every Wednesday at noon, also posted on YouTube and on the Hawaii Educational Policy Center. And today we're going to look at what it takes to start a school from scratch. My interviewee is Kanoe Ahuna, who has been involved with the starting of schools, supporting of schools. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And so you were involved with the early charter movement, were you not?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about how you got involved with that.
So I started off as an elementary education teacher and did that for a year. Found that I was wanting actually to expand myself into more individualized type of learning. So I went into special education and I worked at Stevenson Middle School for about 3 years in special education and got certified. And then I got a calling from some friends and just community people in the area of around Stevenson. Actually, my EA at the time was Kanoe Ahuna.
EA?
Yeah, my educational assistant in my special education class was this wonderful lady, Kanoe Ahuna, who lived in Papakolea. She was part of the Papakolea board, and she said that she would love for me to look into getting into a charter school movement for a Hawaiian charter school. This was back in, I would say, 2000. 2001, and so I said I'd love to, because being a Hawaiian myself and wanting to support other Hawaiian students in the culture and so forth, I was very interested, and so that's kind of where it got started.
So you were involved with special ed in terms of administering it, or
no? Actually, I was in the classroom.
You were in the classroom.
So I was a Department of Education teacher. Started off with elementary ed, and then immediately went into special education when I was offered a position at Stevenson, and that's the school that's in the community for Papakolea and Po'oa, which is where I'm from. So I took the job because I thought, awesome, I get to work within my community and with all the kids in my community. And then
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on ThinkTech Hawaii. Center Stage airs every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and of course you can check out our...
And before you know it, I was being offered to apply for...
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center
Stage coordinator for the beginning and the birthing of Kanoe Ahuna Charter School. It was their first year, actually. So I was like right in there at the beginning of that movement, and actually was a part of helping move the world to today.
So right now, National Charter School is located near the nature center.
Yeah, and actually when we first initially started, it was at the Center for Hawaiian Studies at Kumuku Kalani Center on University of Hawaii campus. So we were there, I believe, for the first two years. They hosted us, and that was awesome and amazing. It was a perfect place for the birthing of a Hawaiian charter school and the charter school movement in regards to this being a new thing for the state at the time. So, yeah.
So you were part of the team, really, that was getting this off the ground, and what were some of the, I mean, open the door to your discussions you're having around this table, you know.
So it was really much of a grassroots movement, and I kind of got sucked into it, and you know, it was interesting because coming from the special education Department of Ed world, and you know, that whole thing, and then jumping straight into this grassroots was like very much of a challenge and a process that all of us were learning and growing at the same time. And so I think my experience in the special ed prior, and you know, learning about the process in the Department of Ed with IEPs and all that kind of
individual education plans.
Yes, and all the special education documentation, the Felix Waihe'e, and all these things. Being involved in that for the past 3 years at Stevenson really helped me to understand and bring that to helping this grassroots charter school who was actually still, although grassroots, still in the public school system, understand the process of student services coordinator. And at that time, the student services coordinator position was a Felix Waihe'e position under the special education law. And so every school, including charters, were required to have a SSC at the time. So we're like the liaison between the parent and the school and the services that special ed provided. So that really helped me to, although I was a special ed teacher in Stevenson, I worked closely with the SSC there as well. So I had a good understanding of what that position needed to do.
So those who started this particular charter school,
yeah,
why did they do it? What was the, the critique or the lack, the felt need there?
When I got involved with Theone, and then she introduced me to this wonderful group of grassroots, very visionary people. Dr. Kukahakalau was one of them, who really started the movement for Hawaiian charter schools, and Keola Nakanishi. I mean, I can go on and on with all these names of wonderful people, but their real passion, I believe, was to make a difference in the education world and providing for like a more unique, I guess, individualized type of education that was outside of the box, allowing for, especially for the Hawaiian charter schools, allowing for our culture and our traditions to be present in the school through project-based learning, and really being grassroots with having our students identify with who they are first, where they are and how they can identify and with the Aina and our land, and understanding all the resources that come with that and how that plays into part with education. And so it was more of like helping children to have that self-discovery and be, having that who am I in this community, and how am I learning from that,
So you have this, motivation, idealism as a group, but now reality hits, right?
Yeah.
You have to have a place, you have to have people, you have to know what you're teaching,
Yeah.
right? What was that like?
Well, I think for a lot of charters, and even today, it's always like, that's always a scramble, it's always the challenge. Charter schools are very different in that they don't have a facilities. They don't have a cafeteria. They don't have a library. They don't even have a janitorial, services. They have to come up with all of that on their own. So that's can be fun part, because you can work out of the box and get creative, but it's also a challenge because it also comes down to funding and all these challenges that and finding the spaces and the places that, so we, at that time, Halau Kumano was very fortunate to have the Hawaiian Studies host them for the first 2 years. And then that's where we went into Paradise Park, and, so the director of the charter school, or I would say, what we call the principal in a regular school, really needs to be that visionary, that out-of-the-box thinker. They have to be able to utilize resources in the community, which is what charter schools are about, is that grassroots support to help them move forward. So I think that's where starting a school, that's where you have to really look at what is your purpose? Who are you serving? What's your target student population going to be like? What's your community like? What kind of resources are around your community? And what's the purpose of it? Like, so for Hawaiian charter schools, their focus is building that culture, that rich culture and traditions into the school, daily school life, and getting students grounded with Aina-based curriculum. But it might be different for another school. Hawaii Academy of Arts and Sciences, they're very STEM-oriented, based on arts and technology and engineering, that kind of thing. So every school is different, but I would say that they all have some visionary focus, some mission that they want to pursue.
So you have this idea, you have a plan, And now you go to a community, the parents, and you say, come over to this, leap off the cliff here with us. Did you find that parents and families were anxious, willing, or you had to make the case, or what was it?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think there's parents out there that are looking for an alternative for their child, another opportunity. You know, the traditional school is great, but it's not for everybody. That's why we seek private schools. That's why we seek charters. That's why the public school system, maybe students are just fine, their parents are fine, but it's that giving that opportunity of options for a parent. Every student is unique learner, and not the traditional school is not for everyone.
So it did help, I assume, that you were in close proximity to several Hawaiian communities that homesteaders and others around the university area itself.
Yes. So I think because it was envisioned and supported by a Hawaiian community of people, grassroots, that's how that school came about. But that's not to say that charter schools have to be Hawaiian focused, or any a new school for that matter has to have that focus. But for Halau Kumana at the time, that was their vision.
And do you think that they got a certain legitimacy by starting at the university campus?
Yes, I think so. It helped, especially being on the Hawaiian Studies campus. That was amazing. So, not all of the charters, as a part of being in this whole movement, in the beginning of this whole movement, there were charters out there that really struggled with finding a facility. So although Halau Kumana had that opportunity, it wasn't so for everybody else. So I think those are things you have to think about prior to starting a school.
So among the group that started this and was in on the ground floor, you must have had some really interesting arguments about, we should do this versus we should do that,
I would say when I came into Halau Kumana, they kind of already had their ducks in order, so they did their homework. But the part that was really fascinating to me is how they got there, and the passion that was put into it. And you have to really be, ready for and open to new challenges and being able to think out of the box. So, but they already had that prepared. But I can say, throughout that movement, the challenges that came forward were we couldn't stay at Hawaiian Studies for a very long time. So then ended up at Paradise Park. But just all of those challenges of facilities and the funding being equal and inequitable, and just the constant moving of the difference every year in legislation, the charter schools funding goes up and down, and so that is very important in starting a school and being able to keep the sustainability of it. So they have to be able to look at the long term as well.
And it started out, as elementary or
middle school? No, it was middle school through high school. So I believe we started at 6th grade and we were already open to 12th grade, so 6th through 12.
So you already have to specialize in your staff and your teaching. It's not quite like an elementary school where everybody kind of teaches the same thing. Now I teach math, and we need a social studies, and we need an expert in each with their own license.
Yes, exactly. But at the, I have to say, I was involved in pretty much the scheduling of the school day and where people had to go, and so there was a lot of discussions with staff. But I think the great thing too about that grassroots is that everybody gets to be a part of the discussion, and everybody's input is very important. So in that regard, there was a number of garage meetings.
Okay, and we're going to get to those garage meetings after our short break. We're talking with Kanoe Ahuna, who has been at the grassroots level of starting and supporting new schools. We'll be back in 1 minute.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on ThinkTech Hawaii. Center Stage airs every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and of course you can check out our archives on YouTube or on ThinkTech Hawaii anytime you like. Why should you do that? Because this is an arts show that I believe is making a difference in lives. We talk with artists of various ilk. We talk with painters and writers, playwrights, novelists, poets, sculptors, dancers, you name it, directors, actors, of course. And we don't only talk about what people do, but we talk about how they do it. And my favorite part of the conversation, we talk about why they do it. And it's really common on this show to hear people say, wow, I didn't think about it that way. And it's very common to hear people afterwards who have seen the show say the same thing. And I hear all the time that people are inspired by the conversations that we have. So why don't you join us and be inspired too? That's Center Stage on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock. We'll see you Center Stage.
Welcome back to Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. We're talking with Kanoe Ahuna about starting schools and some of that early experience when she was at the ground floor of starting a charter school with a Hawaiian focus. But you also got involved with starting an online private school. Talk about how that developed.
Okay, well, let's see. So I learned quite a lot in the beginning of the charter school movement and being a part of that, and actually from having some really hardcore mentors that were some of the founders of the charter schools that still exist today, Connections, John Thatcher and Steve Hirakami with Hawaii Academy of Arts and Sciences. They pulled me into this being on the board of directors with the Hawaii Charter Schools Network at the time, which was a nonprofit board that was there to advocate for the charters. I served 2 terms, I believe, on that board, and really that's how I learned a great deal of the behind the scenes of the funding and advocating for charters and that whole different administrative side to it. And I learned a lot from them as colleagues. So that kind of opened up my doors to an interest of starting a private school. At the time, my son was about 7 years old, I believe, 7, 8 years old, and he was riding motocross across the nation, across the continent.
Wow! And
in a RV with my husband, they would take time off and just do that. And I actually was doing some creating like homeschool material for him, so he could do that. He could race across the continent, and he could take his work with him. And so I learned, with that, and then my background as I was on a professional bodyboarder at once, long time ago, before this education world. But having that understanding of the surfing industry as well, as a huge part of an industry in Hawaii, because we're in the middle of the Pacific and the ocean is around us, and we have tons of kids that surf, and they're really good at it, and they're actually making more money than a lot of us at a young age. And knowing that and knowing that opportunity that they have of traveling, like my son, but these kids are like traveling around the world, and I think that alone is education in itself and an opportunity that they should be able to take advantage of, being able to travel at such a young age and having that education. So I wanted to look at ways how we could support them, because that isn't not your ordinary sport in the DOE schools or any school, even in private schools. And so I looked at a lot of our kids who were in this industry didn't have that option, and many of them were dropping out, or they weren't finishing school, or they were having to find really challenging alternative ways to get their high school diploma. And then with my son doing the same thing, but in motocross, I started to venture off and look into an online type of schooling. And that's kind of how I birthed a private school that supported that for many of the kids.
So this was a niche of a certain kind of
so
very mobile model, really.
Yes,
Yes,
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was to help those kids so they don't have to drop out and they still can travel the world, you know, and do what they're passionate about and still get an education and have a part of their travels be a part of that education. So I looked into private schools and how to go about that, and that's, you know, when I got involved with Hawaii Association Independent Schools and really understanding what it takes to start a private school now, which is a lot like starting a charter school. Yeah.
So when you're dealing with online, there's a huge technology connection with this. I mean, do you get PCs? Do you get Macs? You know?
Yeah.
Talk a little. I mean, that must have been.
Well, actually, before you even get there, you have to really look at what's your niche. So for the charter school movement, that niche was the one that I was involved with, Halau Kawana. It was really that Hawaiian culture, traditional-based education, project-based learning model. This one was an online type of model, and the target group was focused around students who weren't allowed the opportunity to actively be involved in the sport that they were in, and this one just so happened to be motocross and surfing. And there's a lot of sports out there actually that our traditional school doesn't technically support. Gymnastics is another one. Martial arts.
But
so,
even music. I mean, young musicians who are on
music is another one who that are traveling. So there's a whole group of a whole another student population that is outside of the traditional schooling that students have a passion for, or they're very good at, they're very talented at, but they needed an outlet to continue their education while they were doing that. You know, so outside of like just your typical football and volleyball and basketball kind of sport. So that's the reason for the online schooling, looking at that as an alternative. It
does sound like it requires a different definition of community.
Yes.
If you're in a close community or Hawaiian community or in a region or whatnot, it's where you live.
Right.
And the people that live with you. But this is what you do, which is sort of more the social network, trends of.
Well, I have to say it was something new for myself as well. So, learning more about the private school sector of education as well. That there's a DOE, and then there's also a Hawaii Association Independent Schools, which is kind of like the DOE for private schools. So you have to kind of understand that, and then also accreditation and all these things come into play, and being able to establish that and get that moving forward, so that the whole ethics behind everything as well, and having that integrity within the school, being able to, how do you give grades? How do you give diplomas, So that's all things that you have to think about when you start a school. Like what does it entail to be able to actually give a student a diploma and have that diploma be recognized by University of Hawaii or Stanford or another, or KCC or whatever it might be, Those are all very important because charter schools are part of the Department of Education system, so diplomas come with that. But although they do pursue WASC accreditation as well, but when you start a private school, it's like, how can anybody just start a school? Kind of, sort of, yes. You can if you have the the passion, the interest. It's a lot of work.
But getting back
that
to
may not pay you right away.
I mean, young people are required to be in school of some sort, right? So how do you create the legal authority to say, if they come to my school, it's just like being in that other school?
Well, if you're doing a private school, you of course want to go through the private school organization. They give you a Hawaii Association Independent Schools. They will guide you. They have their own personal application process, and they actually have They're affiliated with WASC as well.
So explain WASC a little bit.
Yeah, Western Association of Schools and Colleges. It's an accreditation that a lot of schools want to pursue because it allows the school to be able to give that diploma if they're WASC accredited, and even if they're not, I mean, it just gives that credibility to the school to be able to say, okay, yeah, especially if you're a private school, because you don't have that Department of Education or that public school type of, overseeing or whatever to give a diploma. So who is giving the diploma,
So can you start a school before you have accreditation, or
Yes.
this, you can?
Yes.
So you can get the accreditation before
You actually
you
can't
open
get-
your doors?
You actually can't get accreditation until you open your doors.
Oh, okay.
You have to open your doors first, because what are
Okay.
they gonna accredit?
Right. And how
So,
long does it take then to get it?
It takes anywhere, so you have to be in business for, I think, a good year.
A year.
1 year, you have to be open before you can even apply to WASC.
Mm-hmm.
But what you want to do, if you're looking to start or found a school, is you really want to seek the support of the private school or an organization that has credibility to then help you along the school process. In Hawaii, it would be HAIS. There's other organizations out there that provide that support. There's also like Council of International Schools as well, which is like Western Association of Schools and Colleges, but it's more an international global model. There's all different types of philosophies and organizations out there to support. There's International Baccalaureate. I mean, but you want to look and seek to one that already has some type of credibility, and then use that to help you structure, or not structure, but I guess help you through the process, because they already have the credibility.
So if you're starting a private elementary school, when a student emerges, there's all kinds of public and other schools they could get into, but if you're doing a high school, then you had mentioned earlier, why would a college recognize this degree? That's a little more pressure if you go through the high school graduation, yes?
Yes. Yeah, because you want to make sure, like, say you have this amazing student that's attending your school and they want to go to Stanford or Harvard for that matter. They're just like out there, like amazing academically, and they graduate from your school, and if your school is not recognized by an accredited organization like WASC, so to speak, or Council of International Schools, COIS, then they may or may not take your student's diploma.
So
And
that's a real drawback.
That's a drawback. Not more for the student, you're helping the student move forward, so you're almost setting up the student to fail if you do that. We want to help them move forward in life and not keep them back. So that's why you would want to get that, move towards something like that.
We're talking with Kanoe Ahuna about what it takes to start a charter school, start a private school, accreditation. These are all things that many people just take for granted as they send their student to a well-known school or a public school. We'll be back in a minute to continue this conversation.
Aloha, I'm Kanoe Ahuna, president of the Grassroots Institute and host on Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Think of the sad alternative, let's not work together. Here in Hawaii, with all of our diversity and the richness of the people, it's important for us to come together around issues on the basis of what's right and what's good and what's going to serve the common good. And that's what we try to do at Ehana Kako. Every week, we interview movers and shakers, people in government, business, and other sectors of society to talk about how to create together a better government, economy, a better world here in Hawaii that can bless the rest of the world. I thank you for your attention to ThinkTech Hawaii, and we look forward to seeing you every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. We're Ehana Kako, and we wish you well. Aloha.
Yeah, he's doing aloha.
Aloha, welcome back to Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. We're talking about starting schools, both private and public, with Kanoe Ahuna, who has been involved with a number of schools. And now, but you also have been involved with supporting those who've started through writing grants and even writing charters. Talk a little bit about of what the people who give the money are looking for.
Well, I think, first of all, you have to determine what you want to do. You're trying to start a charter school, or you're going to try to start a private school, because they're completely, totally different things in a sense of funding sources too. So, you know, I was involved with helping support some of the charters getting off the ground, or and in that case, there's federal grants out there to help get to even see if you want to pursue a charter school. So there was, I believe, helped with the Kawaikini school when they moved from Kulakaiapuni, which was an immersion program within the DOE. It was kind of like a school within a school type of model at the time. And they were on Kapaa Elementary's campus, and they were looking to start a charter to
spin off.
Yeah, to spin off into a charter. And so they wanted to, you know, get more autonomy to be able to run a Hawaiian immersion program and have more culture-based and project-based learning in their school. And they were kind of stuck within the DOE system in regards to being able to take their kids out into the lo'i and to do more project-based kind of learning.
Okay.
So they, so there was a sub-grant at that time, federal sub-grant, and I think it was about $150,000. If they applied to it, they had it was an actually grant application that they had to show that they had an interest in what they were proposing to do, like a school that they were proposing to do. So I helped write the sub-grant, and what you want to do is, in a case like that, a sub-grant is amazing because once you get the $150,000, you have then like a year or so to be able to explore the idea of a charter. And at the end of the year, maybe you don't want to do it, but at least you had that opportunity, those resources to explore it. So that's for, like, if you want to look and seek into charters, there's all these types of funding resources available to in that regard.
These were federal money, so they're kind of like, here, explore it. You didn't really have to say how you were going to do it yet, right?
Kind of, sort of, but not to the extent of actually of applying to be a charter. So there's that. So once you explore, maybe you decide, okay, I think we want to do this. I think we have the ability, they have the community support, we have the resources, and we want to move beyond just exploring now. And we're done using our $150,000, and here we go. Let's jump into it. Now what? So then that's when they start, and they actually made it through, and they're Kawaikini, and they're doing awesome, and so they're a charter school now. But then there's also private schools, and don't get me wrong, once you're a charter doesn't mean that you're funding, you know, you constantly have to look for funds. So I believe charters right now are about $6,000 per pupil, where a typical DOE student gets about $12,000 per pupil in regards to they have a facility already, they have janitorial services, they have nurses and health aides and all of that.
So are there grants for all these specific things that a public or a charter or, you know, we don't have a bus. Here's a grant for a bus, you know, I mean.
You got to get creative with those.
There's
not specific funding just for buses or health aid or whatever. You need to really look at different funding sources and get creative with being able to apply to different grants, private and federal or state funds grants, to work for positions like that or even support services like that.
Now, anyone who ever wrote a grant to the federal government knows they have...
It's like writing a dissertation.
They have these reviewers who may not know anything about Hawaii, let alone Hawaiian culture or anything like that. You're really a translator of some of these ideas into trying to figure out what those people giving out the money are thinking, yeah?
Right. I think a lot has to do with really knowing your community and partnering. Partnerships are wonderful. So I did work on a federal grant once that was funded a few times actually. And it was a partnership with Kawaikini and the Hawaiian charter schools, the other Hawaiian charter schools on Kauai that partnered with the Native Hawaiian health systems, which was on Kauai, it's Ho'olalahui, Hawaii. They were actually the ones who wrote the grant, and it was a health grant. It wasn't even an education grant. It was actually it was a Native Hawaiian education grant, but focused around health careers, and it was awesome. It was awesome because the grant supported students getting information on health careers. So health career people would come into the schools and provide, either services or share what they do. We'd have a health career fair every year, and all the schools would be a part of it. So you have to really get creative like that with partnerships. So they partnered with a healthcare system, and then they were able to get physical fitness activities in the school. We had an after-school program that provided healthy Native Hawaiian project-based learning. So they learned how to farm using Hawaiian tradition and culture. And then they actually, brought these things home, and which was a healthy nutritional value to the Ohanas in the home. So that they were bringing home fresh kalo and uala and all these great things from after school farming, and then bringing it into school. So you can get very creative with grant funding to support programs.
Yeah, it sounds like to sustain schools, the topic of education is too narrow. You have to look at health, you have to look at all those other contexts where people want to give money for something. It might be a school, might not be a school.
Yeah, there's a number of funding opportunities out there, but I think the more people partner, the more schools are able to partner with their community, whether it's the community college next door, or the Rotary Club, or right now I'm actually helping to do a 21st Century grant, and it's a beautiful thing when a public schools can partner with charter schools. And so that's what's happening right now on Kauai. We're actually partnering them up with a nonprofit organization, High Tech Youth Network, and they provide digital technology support. And another partner in there is the Makery, Dr. Neil Scott. He's got this amazing program, and he's going to be one of the partners. So it's all, the more partners that we have involved in a grant, I mean, it just helps spread the wealth, and I think the value to the one giving the grant is the grantee, I guess. The grantor is the value that they see of their money being spread across the community, and not just going to one central place, but being able to not only support the school itself, but the community overall.
So it's kind of a confidence builder for the grantor.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put all my eggs in this one little basket.
Yeah, but I can reach more students and more community people if you have more partnerships.
So you're suggesting that there's a trend here in education in general, I think, that. So if you've been involved with the traditional department schools and charters and private and writing grants and doing these partnerships, where do you think education or public education is going?
I think, my direct experience with public education, now I have two children in public education right now. One is in elementary, in Kapaa Elementary, and one is at Kapaa High School. And then I have a private school son in private school. And then I've been involved in charters forever now. And so I think that the public schools are really starting to see the value of community. And I give props to Kapaa High School right now. They have a lot of huge community Mr. Hamada is just like empowering his community right now to be a part of the school. And I see that value, not only the students are being able to connect within their community, and if you can bring the community into the school, that's the best thing. So that kind of more of a going into a grassroots or out of the box, and how do we bring community resources into our school is what enriches the school.
It does sound
And
like some
Charter's been doing that from the get-go.
Right.
They're kind of forced to bring their community into the school.
It does sound to some
Support.
extent that the temporal confinement of a school, so many hours and the school day's over, a lot of the things you've been involved with are extending that into community resources, into community time as well.
Yep. And I think the more schools can open their doors after school to Ohana, to families, to parents, because even kupuna, even grandparents, the more that enriches the student life there and the school life. And then community value, huge value to the community. Because so often parents and as well as the elders in the home are not up to date with education with like their kids. I mean, kids are like digitally, like everything. My little 6-year-old can do everything on an iPhone to his computer. I mean, and he's like even beyond me already. and so the more we can enrich our families at home and give them that support so they can keep up with their child's education, that's a huge value too.
So the model of community and Ohana having the knowledge to really support students is kind of breaking down with this digital world, as you suggest. These kids can do things, and the parents and the grandparents, they have no clue what's going on, right? So if you don't make that connection with the community and the school, that there will be no support system for those students when they go home at night.
Yeah, so I think that's where education is moving for sure. Publicly, charter schools been doing it forever now. They had to. That was part of their movement, was to bring the community into their schools. And I think now the public schools are seeing the value in that.
And the online component of this is another sort of individualistic way of delivering it to students who...
Very much so.
Yeah. And, well, do you see more schools incorporating an online portion of their education?
I see it all over now.
You do?
I mean, the e-school model is huge in the DOE. A lot of the schools are now using E2020 or online vendors, so to speak, that are coming in because they see the value in having a traditional school book, textbook, your paper, big fat textbooks. And I mean, you have one mistake or maybe a year from now or 2 years now, that textbook's out of date already. It needs to be updated. The value in even financial value in having an online textbook is so much. I mean, it could be changed out. Like there's a mistake yesterday, fixed tomorrow. In the textbook. You can't do that in a traditional textbook. So there goes all that money you just put into buying 5,000 textbooks or whatever versus having an online textbook. I mean, so I think a lot of the schools these days are switching over to that digital model, digital libraries. So many kids are now reading books right on their iPad. And it's the instant of being able to pick your book online, choose it and read it versus walking over and having to do a research over at the library or something like that. But I think a lot of schools now are seeing the value in digitizing a lot of their things.
So the entrepreneurial world is starting new schools, more partnerships between schools.
With the private sector.
The private sector and whatnot, and being that communicator between families and grantors and other money. And it sounds like an amazing world that people who get involved with education probably are not that familiar with.
Right.
But the world is changing faster than we even know. So we've been talking with Kanoe Ahuna about how to start a school and what's involved and the trends. We'll be back next week with another mover, shaker, reformer interview. Aloha.